What would you do if the police stormed into your home, planted evidence, and dragged you away in handcuffs just to steal your land? How far would you go to fight back? When corrupt cops target Miriam Carter, they don't realize her daughter, Maya, is a legendary CIA operative. Now, Maya is bringing the fight to them. Will justice prevail? Watch till the end and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. New Orleans in the summertime was a furnace. The kind of heat that pressed down on your skin, making the air thick and heavy. The kind that made sweat trickle down your spine even if you were just sitting still. For Miriam Carter, the heat was just another part of life in the Ninth Ward, where she'd lived for nearly 3 decades. She'd seen storms come and go, both the ones from the sky and the ones that tore through her neighborhood, brought by politicians, crime, and greed. Through it all, she'd stayed standing firm like the old oak tree in her front yard. At 52, Miriam had earned the respect of her community. She ran a small community outreach program, helped struggling families get groceries, and even organized free tutoring for local kids. People looked up to her. But not everyone liked that. She had no idea she was about to become a target. It was one of those afternoons where the heat felt like it was rising from the pavement itself. Miriam had just finished watering the small vegetable garden behind her house when she heard it, the screech of tires, the sharp wail of sirens cutting off abruptly. Her stomach clenched. She turned and saw 2 police cars pulling up in front of her house. The red and blue lights reflected off the windows of the small homes lining the street, catching the attention of curious neighbors peeking out from their porches. Miriam wiped her hands on her apron and stepped forward as 2 officers climbed out. The first was a tall, broad-shouldered white man in his mid-40s with a sharp, angular jaw. His expression was unreadable, but the way he carried himself, heavy boots, squared shoulders, the slight smirk at the corner of his mouth, told her everything she needed to know. He liked this. He liked having power. His name tag read McAllister. Beside him was Lisa Gomez, a stocky Latina officer with dark, intense eyes. She didn't speak, just folded her arms and watched, her expression hard to read. Miriam kept her voice calm. "Officers, can I help you?" McAllister took a slow step forward, eyes scanning the house, then the yard, then back to Miriam, sizing her up. "We got a report about suspicious activity linked to this property." Miriam felt a cold weight settle in her gut. Suspicious activity, linked to her. What kind of suspicious activity? She asked, folding her arms. McAllister didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notepad, flipping through the pages. "We have reason to believe this address may be connected to a drug ring operating in the area." Miriam almost laughed out loud. It was so absurd that for a split second, she thought maybe she'd misheard him. "A drug ring." She repeated, "Officer, I've lived here for almost 30 years. I run a food bank. I go to church every Sunday. The only ring you'll find here is the one my late husband gave me." McAllister didn't look amused. "Just answering a tip, ma'am." Miriam's jaw clenched. She could feel the eyes of her neighbors on her, watching from their windows, from their porches. She knew how this could go. She'd seen it happen before, cops rolling up, accusing someone with no proof, tearing apart homes, ruining lives. She took a breath. "Calm, stay calm. Do you have a warrant?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. McAllister gave her a slow smile. "Not today." Miriam squared her shoulders. "Then I suggest you leave." Gomez finally spoke, her voice measured but firm. "Ma'am, if you have nothing to hide, why not let us take a quick look?" Miriam narrowed her eyes. "Because that's not how the law works." A long silence stretched between them. McAllister tapped his pen against his notepad, then flipped it closed. His smile never reached his eyes. "We'll be back," he said, his voice casual but with an edge that made the hair on the back of Miriam's neck stand up. "And next time, you won't have a choice." Miriam's hands clenched into fists at her sides as she watched the officers turn and walk back to their cars. She stayed rooted to the spot as the engines roared back to life and the police cruisers rolled down the street. The moment they disappeared around the corner, she exhaled shakily, her body finally allowing itself to acknowledge the tension curling in her chest. What the hell just happened? Miriam turned toward her house, but before she could step inside, she heard a voice. "Miss Miriam." She turned to see Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly woman who lived 3 doors down, standing on her porch. Her face was lined with worry. "What did they want?" Miriam shook her head. "Nothing but trouble." Mrs. Jenkins pursed her lips. You be careful now, you know how they are." Miriam nodded, feeling the warning settle deep in her bones. She stepped inside, locking the door behind her, and leaned against it for a moment. This wasn't over. McAllister wasn't bluffing, he would be back. And the question gnawed at her, relentless. Why her? Why now? Who had given them her name? She had always been careful, never involved in anything shady, never given anyone a reason to target her. So why were the police suddenly at her doorstep, trying to pin something on her? Miriam had no answers, but she had a terrible feeling that this was just the beginning. And whatever was coming next, she wasn't ready for it. Langley, Virginia, a place where secrets lived and breathed. For most, the name CIA conjured images of black-clad agents sneaking through foreign cities, intercepting threats before they reached American soil. But for Maya Carter, the real battlefield wasn't always overseas. Sometimes, the real enemy wasn't an international terrorist cell. It was right at home. She was 30 years old, tall and athletic, her toned frame a result of years of training. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen things most people wouldn't believe. To the outside world, she was just an analyst, someone who reviewed intelligence and sat behind a desk at Langley. But that was just a cover. Inside the agency, her name carried weight. Whispers floated through CIA corridors about her exploits. Some said she had infiltrated a South American cartel single-handedly. Others claimed she had been part of a covert operation in Eastern Europe that didn't officially exist. Whatever the truth was, one thing was certain. Maya Carter wasn't the type to sit on the sidelines. And when she saw her mother's text message, she knew something was wrong. Maya had been sitting in a secured briefing room, surrounded by a dozen monitors flashing classified intelligence, encrypted emails, intercepted calls, real-time data on potential foreign threats. But all of that blurred into the background the moment she glanced down at her phone. It was a simple message from her mother. "Something strange happened today. The police came by, said I matched a description in a drug case, threatened to come back with a warrant. Just wanted you to know, I'm fine, but it's unsettling." Maya stared at the screen for a long moment, her pulse kicking up a notch. Miriam Carter wasn't the type to panic. If she was reaching out, this was serious. Maya's fingers moved instinctively, typing back, "Are you okay? Do you need me?" A few minutes passed before her mother responded. "I'm okay for now, just wanted you to know, love you." Maya didn't like it, not one bit. She sat back in her chair, her mind already shifting gears. This wasn't some random police mistake. This was a setup. Maya didn't believe in coincidences. Within minutes, she was running background checks from her secure agency terminal, an act that technically wasn't authorized for personal matters. But Maya didn't care. She pulled up Officer Brad McAllister's records first. Nothing immediately suspicious. A standard career in law enforcement, multiple commendations. But something about him felt off. So she dug deeper. She traced McAllister's financial records, his associations, his online activity, until she found it. McAllister had connections to Victor DuPont. Maya's eyes narrowed. DuPont. That name sent a jolt through her. Victor DuPont was a real estate mogul with a history of shady business deals, the kind that never made it to court but left a trail of ruined lives. He was known for using intimidation tactics to force homeowners out of their properties, making way for luxury developments. And Miriam Carter's house. It sat in the heart of his next project. Maya leaned forward, piecing it together. McAllister was DuPont's enforcer. She knew how these things worked. They'd frame Miriam. They'd plant evidence. They'd make her home a crime scene. Then they'd take it. Not on my watch. Maya's jaw tightened. She closed her laptop, grabbed her go-bag, one she always kept packed, and marched straight to her supervisor's office. Deputy Director Austin Price was a man who didn't flinch easily. He had the kind of face that had seen too much, a permanent shadow of exhaustion in his sharp blue eyes. When Maya knocked once and stepped inside without waiting, he barely looked up. "Carter," he said, flipping through a classified report, "you're supposed to be in briefing." "Something came up," Maya replied. "I need emergency leave." That got his attention. He looked up sharply. "You taking leave?" He closed the file and leaned back. "Must be serious." Maya didn't waste time. "It's my mother." His expression didn't change, but she saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Price was old school, but he respected Maya. And he knew her well enough to understand one thing: if she was asking for time off, it wasn't for a vacation. "How long?" he asked. "As long as it takes." A beat of silence. Then Price sighed and nodded. "Go." Maya exhaled, relieved but still on edge. She was already halfway out the door when Price spoke again. "Carter," she paused. "Whatever's going on, watch your back." Maya met his gaze. "Always do." Maya didn't waste time. She was on a plane to New Orleans before sunset, her mind running 1,000 miles an hour. She knew exactly how this would play out. She'd seen corrupt officers like McAllister before, men who thought they were untouchable. She'd seen scumbags like DuPont, men who bought their power and crushed anyone who stood in their way. They had no idea who they were messing with. Maya didn't operate in the shadows of the law. She wasn't just a daughter coming home to protect her mother. She was the storm they never saw coming. And by the time she was done, New Orleans would never be the same. Maya's plane landed in New Orleans just before dawn, but she wasn't here to sightsee. She was here to hunt. The moment she stepped out of the airport, she scanned her surroundings, her instincts already kicking in. Years of operating undercover had trained her to spot things most people ignored. She rented a car, not from the airport kiosks, but from a private agency that specialized in discreet transactions. If someone was tracking her movements, they wouldn't find her name on any records. Maya knew McAllister and his people would be watching. She was counting on it. Miriam was waiting when Maya pulled up in front of the house. The relief on her face was instant, but so was the worry. "Baby, you didn't have to come all this way," Miriam said, pulling her daughter into a tight hug. Maya held onto her for a second longer than usual. "Yeah, I did." Miriam stepped back, studying her. "This is serious, isn't it?" Maya exhaled sharply. "More than you know." She had spent the entire flight piecing together what was happening. And now, standing in front of her childhood home, her gut told her one thing: this wasn't just about a real estate grab. Something bigger was at play. Maya got to work immediately. She swept the house for listening devices or hidden cameras. Nothing. That was a good sign. It meant whoever was targeting Miriam wasn't confident enough to break in yet. But outside, that was a different story. After setting up motion sensors and small surveillance cameras around the property, Maya sat on the porch watching. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet. Then she saw it. A black SUV, parked just far enough down the street to seem casual, but it had been there for hours. No plates. Tinted windows. Maya's jaw tightened. She pulled out a small handheld signal scanner, running a sweep of the area. Within seconds, she picked up a frequency that didn't belong to any official police dispatch. Encrypted, private. Someone was watching. And they weren't amateurs. Maya knew better than to act immediately. Whoever was behind this was playing the long game, which meant she had to play smarter. So she set a trap. She printed a fake label and slapped it onto a sealed cardboard box. Confidential documents for official review. Only then she placed it near the back fence, right where someone sneaking around would see it. If they were looking to plant evidence against Miriam, they'd want to search for anything incriminating. And once they did, Maya would be waiting. The motion sensors tripped. Maya's phone vibrated silently, flashing an alert from the cameras. She didn't need to look at the screen, she was already moving. Dressed in black tactical gear, she moved silently through the house, her heart steady. Years of training had prepared her for ambushes in war zones. This was nothing new. She slipped outside through the back door, hugging the shadows. And then she saw him, a hooded figure creeping along the fence, crouching near the fake package. Maya narrowed her eyes. The guy was careful, not a junkie looking for a quick hit, not some random thief. He was here for one reason, to plant something. He reached for the package, and Maya struck. Maya moved fast, grabbing the guy from behind and slamming him to the ground before he could even breathe. His head hit the dirt with a dull thud, and he let out a muffled grunt of pain. Maya flipped him onto his back, pinning his arms, knee pressing against his chest. "Who sent you?" she demanded. The guy thrashed beneath her, but Maya was stronger, faster. I don't know what you're talking about." He gasped. Maya leaned in closer, her voice calm. "Wrong answer." She pulled out a small knife from her pocket, not to use, just to make a point. "Try again." His breathing turned ragged. She saw the moment he realized she wasn't just some woman protecting her house. She was something else, something dangerous. "I was paid to plant something here," he finally blurted out. "That's all I know." Maya's grip tightened. "By who?" The guy hesitated. "Big mistake." Maya pressed the knife just under his chin, barely touching the skin. "By who?" she repeated. "McAllister," he choked out. "It was McAllister." Maya's heart slammed against her ribs, even though she had expected it. McAllister was pulling the strings. That meant this wasn't just about harassment anymore. This was a setup. Maya let the guy go, but not before she grabbed his phone and snapped a photo of his face. "Run." He didn't need to be told twice. She watched as he sprinted into the darkness, tripping over his own feet. The moment he was out of sight, Maya exhaled slowly. She should have been satisfied, but she wasn't. This was just the beginning. Maya walked back inside, locking the door behind her. Miriam was awake now, standing in the dim kitchen light. "What happened?" Maya tossed the stolen phone onto the table. "They tried to plant something on you." Miriam's face paled. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew they were trying to frame me." Maya sat down, rubbing her temples. "It's McAllister. He's working for someone bigger, someone who wants this house gone." Miriam sank into a chair, shaking her head. "So what do we do now?" Maya's lips curled into a slow, dangerous smile. "Now," she picked up the guy's phone, already running a background trace. "Now we turn the tables." Maya had spent years tracking down corrupt officials overseas. She was more than ready to do it on home soil. And this time, she was playing for keeps. The storm came at exactly 7:15 a.m. Maya had barely gotten a few hours of sleep, her mind still running on adrenaline from the night before. She had spent hours going over the footage from the security cameras, reviewing the face of the intruder she had caught, analyzing every detail. She knew McAllister was behind this. She just didn't think he'd move this fast. The first sign was the sound of tires screeching outside. Then came the banging on the front door. Miriam, still in her robe, looked up from her coffee with a start. "What in the world?" Maya was already moving. She peeked through the window and her stomach dropped. 2 police cruisers, McAllister and Gomez. And this time they weren't here to talk. The moment Miriam opened the door, McAllister shoved past her, boots stomping against the floor. Gomez followed right behind him, along with 2 other uniformed officers. Maya blocked the hallway, standing in their path. "Where's your warrant?" McAllister grinned as he slapped a piece of paper against her chest. "Right here." Maya snatched it and scanned it fast. It was fake. The language was deliberately vague, the signatures looked off, and the supposed judge's name wasn't even one that existed in Orleans parish courts. McAllister knew she knew. He was counting on the fact that it wouldn't matter. Because they weren't here for legal reasons. They were here to make a statement, to make an example out of Miriam. The officers spread out like locusts, ripping through the living room, knocking over furniture, pulling drawers open and dumping their contents on the floor. Miriam clutched her robe, her hands shaking. "Stop this," she snapped. "You have no right." "We have every right," McAllister said smoothly, flipping over a chair. "You see, the moment we get a tip about criminal activity, we have to investigate." Maya stood frozen, her hands clenched into fists. This was all for show. They weren't looking for anything. They already knew what they were going to find. And just like that, it happened. "Well, well, well," Gomez called out from the kitchen. Maya turned just in time to see her holding up a plastic bag of white powder. She had pulled it from behind the flour container, where no one in their right mind would ever hide something illegal. Miriam's face drained of color. "That's not mine," McAllister grinned. "Yeah, tell that to the judge." Before Maya could move, before she could say a single word, they grabbed Miriam, twisted her arms behind her back, snapped the handcuffs on her wrists. Miriam gasped. "No, stop. I didn't." McAllister leaned in close, whispering just loud enough for Maya to hear. "Your mother made this too easy." Maya's blood boiled, but she didn't react. She didn't lunge for him, didn't punch him in the throat the way her body was screaming at her to do. She just stared him down, her face stone cold, locking the rage deep inside. Because she had the one thing they didn't know about. Video evidence. She just had to play the long game. Outside, neighbors had gathered in silence. Some had their phones out, recording. Others just stood watching, helpless. They all knew what this was. Miriam Carter wasn't some drug dealer. She was the woman who handed out groceries at the community center, the woman who prayed for people at Sunday service. But none of that mattered. Not when the system was rigged. McAllister pushed Miriam toward the open squad car, his grip firm. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice steady despite the fear. McAllister snorted. "Nah, I'm making a point." And then the doors slammed shut, and just like that she was gone. Maya stood in the doorway, watching as the police cruisers disappeared down the street. She didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. Then, without a word, she turned on her heel and walked straight to the kitchen. She reached up to the small, barely noticeable clock mounted on the wall and pulled out the tiny, hidden camera inside it. A camera that had recorded McAllister and Gomez the moment they planted that bag. Maya exhaled slowly. Checkmate, mother of Urs. She grabbed her phone and dialed a number. The voice on the other end answered immediately. "Carter." Maya didn't waste time. "Holloway, we need to talk." Detective James Holloway was one of the few good cops left in this city. He had spent years in internal affairs, investigating dirty officers, exposing corruption when he could, but even he had limits. Until now. Maya met him in a dimly lit parking garage away from prying eyes. She handed him the flash drive. "Play it," she said simply. Holloway took one look at the footage and his face went pale. The video was clear as day. McAllister pulling the bag out of his pocket, Gomez pretending to find it, them smirking as they put Miriam in cuffs. Holloway sat back in his seat, running a hand over his face. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "We just uncovered a massive corruption ring." Maya crossed her arms. "No, we just cracked it open. Now we burn it to the ground." Holloway exhaled, his mind already racing. He knew what this meant. This wasn't just about Miriam. This was about every single person McAllister and his crew had done this to. This was about how deep this corruption really went, and most importantly, who was pulling the strings. He looked at Maya. "You know this means war, right?" Maya's face was unreadable. Then slowly she smiled. "Good, I was getting bored." To be continued for years. McAllister and DuPont had operated in the shadows, using power and intimidation to manipulate the system. That ended today. Detective James Holloway wasn't a man easily shaken. He had spent over 2 decades in law enforcement, most of it watching corruption fester in the very system meant to protect people. But what he had seen in Maya Carter's footage, this wasn't just one bad cop. This was an entire network built on intimidation, planted evidence, and rigged deals. And now, they had proof. Step 1. Freeze McAllister's assets. Holloway and his internal affairs team dug into McAllister's financials, and what they found was damning. Secret wire transfers from a shell company tied to Victor DuPont. A house in Florida paid off in cash. Unexplained deposits into offshore accounts. McAllister wasn't just dirty, he was getting paid well for it. Step 2. Link it to DuPont. Maya had been one step ahead. She had already hacked into a private database, tracing phone records, encrypted emails, and suspicious real estate transactions. And then, the jackpot. A leaked audio recording. Taken from one of DuPont's private meetings, the recording was crystal clear. "Miriam Carter is a problem. We need to remove stubborn people like her before they screw up the deal." That was it. The smoking gun. Now they had everything. They didn't warn McAllister. They didn't give him time to run. At 6:45 a.m., McAllister arrived at the station, expecting another normal day. He walked into his office, coffee in hand, when he saw Holloway and 2 federal agents standing there, waiting. For the first time, McAllister hesitated. "What's going on?" he demanded. Holloway didn't even blink. "You're under arrest." McAllister barely had time to react before the cuffs snapped around his wrists. His face went red as his fellow officers watched, some whispering, others simply staring. "This is bullshit. You have nothing on me," he snarled. Holloway just held up the flash drive with the footage. "Really? Let's play this in court and see what they think." Across town, Gomez was taken down next, caught trying to delete files from her computer. By noon, both were booked and charged with corruption, abuse of power, evidence tampering, and the best part. It didn't stop there. At 3:30 p.m., federal agents swarmed Victor DuPont's estate. They seized financial records, confiscated files, and by sunset, Victor DuPont was in handcuffs, charged with real estate fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. For the first time in his career, he couldn't buy his way out of trouble. Maya stood outside the Orleans Parish Jail, arms crossed, heart pounding. And then the door opened. Miriam stepped out, blinking against the sunlight, looking tired but unbroken. The moment she saw Maya, her face softened, and just like that, Maya was a kid again. She ran forward, pulling her mother into a hug. "Told you I had this," Maya whispered. Miriam laughed, a little watery but real. "Yeah, baby. You did." News cameras flashed, capturing the moment. Miriam Carter wasn't just a woman who had been framed. She was a survivor, a fighter, a symbol. By that evening, her name was everywhere. Miriam Carter's arrest exposes widespread corruption. How one woman stood against a rigged system and won. Miriam was offered settlements, money for damages. But instead of keeping it, she opened a legal aid center because if this could happen to her, it could happen to anyone. A week later, Maya sat on the front porch, sipping a cold drink as the sun set. She had been here longer than planned, and part of her didn't want to leave. Miriam sat beside her, watching the world go by. "You heading back soon?" Maya sighed. "Yeah, the agency's been patient, but..." Miriam nodded. "I get it, you've got a big life out there." Maya turned to her, serious now. If anyone ever tries to mess with you again, she paused, then smiled, slow and sharp. I'll be on the next flight home. Miriam chuckled, shaking her head. You always were a stubborn one. She reached out, squeezing Maya's hand. But I'm glad you are. Maya squeezed back. No matter what happened next, Miriam Carter would never stand alone again. Justice had been served, and the fight wasn't over. But for now, they had won. At its core, this story isn't just about corruption, injustice, or even revenge. It's about resilience, truth, and the power of standing up for what's right. Lesson 1. Silence enables corruption. Miriam Carter wasn't a politician, a lawyer, or someone with influence. She was just a woman trying to live her life with dignity. Yet the system tried to crush her because she refused to comply. But here's the truth. Corruption thrives when good people stay silent. If Maya hadn't fought back, if Holloway hadn't pursued justice, McAllister and DuPont would have continued ruining lives unchecked. It takes courage to stand up, but one voice can spark a movement. Lesson 2. The system isn't always broken. But it needs fighters. Not every cop is bad. Not every leader is corrupt. But when corrupt people hold power, it makes it easy to lose faith in the system. Detective Holloway represents the good ones, the ones who refuse to turn a blind eye. Maya. She's the fighter who reminds us that justice doesn't come easy. The lesson. We don't abandon the system, we fix it. And we fight to make it work for everyone, not just the privileged few. Lesson 3. Family is the strongest shield at the heart of everything. This was a story about a daughter who refused to let her mother fall. Maya could have ignored that text. She could have trusted the system to handle it. But she knew better. The people we fight for are the ones we love. And in the end, the Carter family didn't just survive. They won. Because love, justice, and the truth will always be stronger than fear, corruption, and lies. And that's a lesson worth remembering.